Well, here's my second point. Any money we spend educating these kids is not a cost but an investment, surely, because these kids, the better educated they are, the better they'll do when they leave school, and the better jobs they'll do, the better work they'll do, their productivity will be higher, and they'll be generating economic wealth in the country.
Yeah, I think that's an argument for spending money on education, certainly. But in a sense, what we're talking about is that we don't want too many people on which to spread the money, because then you won't get as good education as you otherwise would. We would rather have a more limited number and have more money to spend on them.
It's a multiplier, isn't it? I mean, I opposed this at the time, and I now regret it. If we had given the Hong Kong Chinese, all of them, British passports, there would have been an initial huge cost to the exchequer here, in terms of schools, housing, and so on. But as we know about the Hong Kong Chinese and their productivity, their wealth-generating impact, we would have been the net gainers from that.
Well, we might well have been, because the Chinese are probably the best economic performers in the world. But it rather depends on what happened to the numbers, because the other bottom line in this is we are an island. I mean, what an obvious point to make. But all these references that are made sometimes to the United States, to Canada, to Australia, I mean, they're huge countries.
Sure.
But
there's large parts of our country also empty, Andrew. Just fly over it and see.
Yeah, I know, but you try getting into most towns in Russia. I mean, try getting into London in Russia. We in the south and the southeast, people are crowded. They feel crowded. In England as a whole, we are 4 times as crowded as France. We are, with Holland, the most crowded country in Europe. And what people ask, you must know this, George. You've been out in the streets much more than I have. What people are asking is, what the hell is the point of this? Why are we allowing these enormous changes to our society for reasons which many people don't understand?
Well,
and that, in a way, that's almost more important.
That's a new issue you've raised there, Andrew.
I've shifted my ground.
Yeah, it's not.
But it is an important one.
It's not just about numbers. In a sense, with numbers, you know, I could be with you. You could persuade me about numbers.
Yeah, it's
but
both.
when you start talking about changes, that's when I become anxious. Because the society is always changing. I myself am from Irish immigrant stock.
And we're very glad to have you, George.
Thank you, Andrew. But when, when my grandparents arrived, the people weren't very glad to have them. They used to stick up posters in the windows, no dogs, no Irish. But they're glad now, I hope. Throughout the land, they're acclamation.
Well, I am, George. It's
acclamation.
All right,
what's wrong with changes, Andrew? Well, that's my question.
Yeah, indeed. Well, the serious answer to that is it depends on the scale of them and the speed of them. And you know better than I do, you must know better than I do, that a lot of people out there are very concerned about the scale and the speed of change.
They are, but should they be, is the question.
And I think that's fair enough.
Should a man like you, sophisticated, intelligent, you're a prime piece of Englishness, shouldn't you be using your eloquence and the energy that you clearly have to make people less anxious about these things rather than more?
I'll tell you, that's a very fair question. What I would say is this. I want to do 2 things. I want to get the numbers down in order to make the whole issue manageable, and at the same time make sure that we draw newcomers into our society in the best possible way. But my own view is that we can't do it at the rate of arrivals that we're getting now. Well, I just don't think it's possible.
I know it's not likely to have been the first book on your shelf, but if you read The Ragged-Trousered Philanthropist by Robert Tressel, a very, very great piece of work, written at the very beginning of the 20th century, there's a vignette in this book, in a debate amongst workers, painters and decorators, about the quote-unquote swamping influx of immigration. Then they meant Jews who came into the country and caused the first great immigration scare, changes to immigration law in 1910. It's always been an anxiety, but it's a false anxiety is the point I'm making.
Well, I'm going to throw some numbers at you, George, because the numbers are just nowadays completely different. That's what people don't understand. Yes, there was great hostility to the Jews. Before that, there was great hostility to the Huguenots a couple of centuries beforehand. In both cases, the numbers were very small compared to the population. It was sort of 250,000 over 50 years. We've had 3 million in 12 years. So that's, heaven knows, that's about 20 times faster. And the other one that you hear very often, and rightly so far as it goes, is the Asians who came from Uganda and Kenya. You remember the East African nations?
They've done fantastically well.
Exactly, about 30 years ago. They've done fantastically well. But the total number was about 27,000 spread over 2 years. We're now taking that number almost every month. I mean, we're talking about a rate of arrival 20 times the rate of the Ugandan nations. And that's been going on now for some years. So
last question.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, but last question. Yeah. The only way of actually stemming this is to leave the European Union. Are you in favour of that?
No, but the premise is wrong, because actually there's very little now net immigration from the European Union. The average for the first 15 members, the original ones, over the last 10 years is about 20,000. And we had a great burst of people coming from Poland, as we all know, Poland and the others. They are now, last year, only 5,000 was the inflow. So those numbers fluctuate a bit, but they're not huge. We're talking about 250,000 of whom, say, 200,000+ are from the rest of the world. So when we're talking about immigration, you have to look at the numbers and sort of bear that in mind. And the reality is that Europe is not the source of immigration nowadays. It's the rest of the world.
Andrew, always a pleasure to discuss with you. Thanks very much.
My pleasure too. Have a nice evening.
Thanks,
Right.
Andrew
Bye.
Green, Sir Andrew Green, I should say, of Migration Watch. How has immigration impacted your community? What's it like in your local school? Should the government do more to provide school places in urban areas where there are a shortage of school places? These are just some of the issues thrown up by that very interesting, I hope you found, interview with Sir Andrew Green. 08717 223344.